record, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, so today we have our very own BlueFox, which is a veteran and security researcher. I'm very proud of Chris. Chris has come a long way. I started showing up, 2 years ago, Chris? 3 years ago at the
Yeah, going
Duville.
on 3.
I remember when I saw you at the Duville, and he's come a long way. He's now works for a Fortune something. He's probably one of the biggest and best security operating systems center in the world. I've never seen anything like what you look at. Obviously, I haven't been at Google yet or any other bigger company, but to be part of a company where basically fly hubs for almost everybody. That means something. In that sense, the company's amazing, and it's not easy to get in there, and it's not easy to stay. So you're an achiever because you came from outside of the industry, and now you're there, and now you're presenting here, and you play with me at DEF CON. We actually placed fourth at the ICS. We got to do it again.
Yeah.
Hopefully one day we'll get a black badge. I mean, I don't know, hopefully. I mean, it looks very hard, but maybe one day we'll get it. And so I'm very happy to have you here. Thank you for contributing. Thank you for helping us. And for all of you today, we also have a meeting at that will be 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, which is with the brother sister hackerspace in California. We have introduction to open source intelligence. We're gonna have a Jonathan Klein. He's gonna speak about how to get started, and Marco is gonna give us a actual demo of a open source intelligence tool. And we actually may be able to put both of this together, because I'm sure a lot of what Chris is about to show has to do with open source intelligence. Also, for those who are here, we're going to have Roger Grimes next week on Hacking MFA. That should be an amazing talk. And then we have other talks as well that we will be announcing soon. So thanks for being with us. This will be recorded and posted at the HackMiami YouTube channel. Any questions, please always, let's save it for the end. You can type it in the chat. And without further ado, take it away, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Rod. All right. Let me see here.
Let me set you as presenter.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
All right. Let's see here. Let's see if I can share my screen. Application. Oh, let's see. Okay. All right. Everyone can see my screen?
You're good to go.
Okay. All right. So, basically, I guess what everyone's been noticing lately about like what's happened with the January 6th, the actual siege of the U.S. Capitol, and about how people were basically communicating up until and during and even short time after, like how these organizations, these basically militia-based groups were able to talking, and then basically how like also too where we're going to talk about like where does the line draw between like constitutional free speech, and then also how corporations, implement bans and how they interpret free speech. So basically, this is what I'm talking about is the splinter effects of social media censorship, like where basically free speech versus corporate policy on speech. Basically, this is who I am. I'm a veteran, experience in both, like mostly in radio communications, a little bit of satellite, overseas quite a bit. That's where I kind of splintered off with like learning more about tactical information. Going into computers was roughly just before I went into the law enforcement. And then also too, during this talk too, also I was explaining a little bit about how the barriers and the procedures were done at the Capitol, as best I could from what I got trained on. And currently, right now, as I pointed out, working at a Fortune 500 company in the security incident responder at their SOC. So I'm basically busting my butt helping out customers. And what I do in my off time is I help out with Rod and his group at HackMiami, BSides, Orlando, Tampa. I gave a talk, and BSides, Puerto Rico, and then also with the OWSP chapter in Tampa. Director of the membership at the ISSA South Florida chapter. Also, I do my volunteer work for the Diane Initiative. I help set up their CTF and then monitor it. And I do a little bit of work. I was like a lab validator with the Cybersecurity Forum Initiative. They give me a VM. I basically run through the procedure about how the malware works. And then I basically become a tech writer, write it up, and best explain it to individuals who are with the U.S. government or our allies. I remember an InfoCard where they would basically have an agreement with security professionals like myself and Rod and others who talk with the FBI, and they basically have a partnership where they help each other out with regards to information security. And then recently I was accepted into the Marine Corps Cyber Auxiliary, where basically the Marines invite me to a special conference, and I'm put as an advisor, and I assist them. Which recently they just conducted a service-wide CTF, and they sent me a certificate for appreciation helping them out. So if you do get a chance, if you're just starting up or want to continue going into InfoSec, cybersecurity, I would suggest looking into these organizations and like network and build up your knowledge. So free speech, like how, like we always talk about, like we shouldn't speak versus we should speak. And like this quote here about to announce that there must be no criticism of the president, or that we are to stand by the president, right or wrong. It's not only patriotic and conservative, but it's morally treasonable to the American public. And our former president a long time ago, Theodore Roosevelt, said that. So that's like, it's important about how freedom of speech is. So in the freedom of speech, we have all these apps, and in doing so, we have all these built up of social media websites and apps. And for the last year alone, like these were like the most popular ones. So like we had like Instagram for like mostly for photos, but like I'll go into later, like you'll see like how these organizations of the militia groups and the far right or far left groups were like using these. And then also too, like how like YouTube, they were streaming actual video, like of various offices or on the Senate floor. Same thing for Facebook, which is, they own Instagram, but they also post too, like pictures and videos. So that's acts. Twitter, most famous, like where Trump was like broadcasting his words. That's where he had the most audience, and he was most influential from there. And then TikTok was somewhat there, but they were show clips, but they were mostly interfacing onto like Facebook or YouTube. Now, last year, actually as of January this month, from a company called Statica, they're based out of Hamburg, Germany. They basically do metrics and statistical analysis on like various subjects. And I was able to get a basic snip of it, and they're showing like basically how many users you know, like around the world, like how many people are using Facebook, YouTube, and these other various apps, right? Now, Parler wasn't up there yet because it was, I mean, it just was founded like in 2018, but not too many people were on it at the time. But you can clearly see like where the most influence is, like even today, and not just like related to the Capitol building, but just like in general in everyday life where you see people talk on. Now for Instagram, they launched in 2010. It started as a phone app and high popularity because of like what they can, what you know, what can do with, right? Gained that gained that many users in a short amount of time. And then, of course, like with any type of app, you know, a bigger company will see the advantage of it. It's like, okay, we'll take it up, and then see if they'll do a purchase on it because if they can't beat them, they can buy them. And then, of course, to also like basically, as of this year, like you can see, like the number of people who use it is roughly 140 million. Now, just think about this: like if you have an organization that is not exactly on the good side, just using Instagram to be able to talk to each other, they can still like use this in various communication methods. Like if they want to like do like a geolocation tag of like say like they want to do a meeting and they share it with a certain group inside Instagram, they just take a picture and you can extract the exfil data off of it and say, hey, we're meeting here, or basically they even have to post the data. It just shows a picture of like where they took and it says this is where we're meeting for this month. Now this is what with now again, Facebook owns Instagram, but in a way Instagram had its own rules to a certain extent. And basically what they were talking about, like they don't allow the following groups for a page, a group, an event, or such a platform or profile on their platform that had to basically, it was related to a militarized social movement. That's how they specify it in their policy. And then they said that they support and organize violent acts amid protests. Now, what didn't happen though was initially is what they were talking about is basically like a protest or just like a speech that was being presented by, say, Trump, and that's why they were able to communicate on this for a while. They were just being out of the norm, like this is normal democratic stuff that in the process of like politics, like okay, so this is my speech, let's show up. Now, after the siege though, Instagram noticed that they would double down on to like what their moderation was, and basically they saw like how many people were all of these events, these groups existed, and they realized that they were actually much more widespread in Instagram alone than they initially thought. So it shows you here like how they also removed about 3,300 pages, over 10,000 groups, over 500 events. And then of course too, you can actually link it to your Facebook profile. So that's how they were able to make the connection there. Okay, now Facebook, we all know about Facebook, started Harvard and Mark Zuckerberg. We know about the movie. So basically, like how there was like a social network, how it was initially set up, and then it just exploded. So it's like how more people nowadays talk, especially now given with COVID-19 going on, so everyone's social distance. So everyone's still be able to share and talk to each other. Even like my daughter's softball team, they use Facebook. Now, me personally, I got rid of Facebook a long time ago for privacy reasons. But for obvious, but for the general purpose reasons, though, that these militia groups, they were using Facebook just to communicate with each other if they didn't use like direct, phone calls. It was just a message from one person to another, or if they want to organize a meeting. Again, Facebook was a platform. It was just like it's there, and again, like Instagram, no one was really like, you know, unfortunate to like because they didn't realize like whether they thought it was nearly generally protected under freedom of speech, and they were allowed to organize, they were allowed to talk, get together, but again, it's like they took advantage of it, and then they did, and that's how they were widespread. And now with Facebook directly, they have their own direct standards. And see, like they said, we also give people control over their own experience by allowing them to block, unfollow, or hide people and post. So, like if somebody initially saw something that they were offended by, it gave the people in Facebook to say, "No, I'm not interested," and they move on, right? And if they complained about it, of course, it was probably done as a ticket, submitted up, and then someone reviewed it and possibly for like last year, probably was ignored because it was protected under free speech, because they were allowed to do whatever it is initially, what they were allowed to do, or like to talk about or what they said. Now, they said down here, like, we remove content and disable accounts work in law enforcement if believe there's a genuine risk of physical harm or threats to the public. So like if they blankly just said, I'm going to do this to this person or to this building, then they were able to actually do something about that and then forward it to law enforcement. But beforehand, though, it was, if they didn't meet that criteria, they could issue warnings, they could make suggestions, but not much beyond that, though, at least on to their students, at least up until the actual siege. Okay, so now Twitter. This was like the main one that Trump was using during his speech rallies, and like he was trying to organize people to do the march about the election and about how like he disagreed with it, excuse me, and about how the election process was done versus like how it should have been done. So on his account, on his Twitter account, he would like have all these followers, and it would just spread out easily to other Twitter users and then other platforms like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, right? So, and then like here, like how it was formed, and basically it was not meant to be like what it was for like to be take advantage of like what happened on January 6th. This was just like an honest, like, top to top or peer to peer, or to be able to share information, thoughts in general, right? But again, like you see, like how many users in the millions use Twitter, and this is, I do believe, in 2020. So that you shows how many people in the U.S. Basically were using Twitter. So it gives you an idea like how widespread it is. So again, another platform for these militia groups you take advantage of and get information out. And then also too, just not just militia, but everyone who is used, like they can express, freedom of expression about how or what. All right, so these were not all organizations, but these were just like the key ones that I was able to basically just be able to find pretty easily. And these were the most popular ones, the ones that showed up initially on both the photos and the videos at the actual Capitol siege. So basically, like, For example, if we're starting with the Oath Keepers, these are the people who are in the military or in the police who took that oath about, defending against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and they took it like not one step further, but like way much further. Like it's kind of hard to explain, but they were just real hardcore defenders. Like they were just adamant. Like they believed that if even out of the service or out of the police, that you still had to maintain that oath, which in the spirit of it, it is noble, but it's how you enforce it, how you use that oath, though. That's the difference. And then Antifa, they were there also. They were, with my research, they were either trying to like counterforce the other organizations, but then also even then, some of them went kind of rogue too, and they kind of did their own actions to a certain extent. So even then, they were seen kind of like breaking the law, just the very least. Like all these organizations, they were trespassing at the very least on government property. And then you have like the Quran, like how these people, they have the big Q flags. They were marching in all the protests up until, and then all like the actual speech that Trump gave in D.C. not far from the Capitol. Like they basically, like they were on Trump's side, and they believed that there was a conspiracy and that the election was rigged, and then it was basically, it just kept feeding itself over and over. Another group, the 3%ers, another far right group, they were basically founded as in like basically believing that only 3% of the Americans were fighting against the British at the time during the Revolutionary War. But again, they still believe that the election was rigged. And that's why they are marching with these other groups also. And then lastly, on here is the Proud Boys, where you can recognize them by they've seen them wearing their orange caps or headgear, and you can see like basically they were glorified neo-Nazis at the very least, and we know how that can be construed. So like all these groups here, these were just like the majority. Now there was more groups, but there were smaller and less organized. But these were the main ones that we saw like inside the Capitol building itself. Yeah. Now you see here, like in this photo, like this is the building right here. This is like one of the main doors to get into the actual building itself, and you can see already they've already done extensive damage to both the outer pane window, and then also like even the doorknobs, because there were, at least this one was like broken off. So they were already at this point. You can see here like they were serious about getting inside. So what here is I'm going to discuss like a general timeline about the events of it, about what the organizations were doing. So. All right, so like before noon, this is like roughly up until January 6th, where you had to like get together using the various platforms like discussed, like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and you basically had Trump, who's talking about the election, and specifically like even around November time, and it literally just lit the fuse, and then basically people are now going to organize together and basically do an actual march in DC. But from the the analysis from the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, they were basically looking into like, okay, we were just going to do a march, and then we're just going to show up at Trump's rally and to support Trump. But then right after, like right, just like when you get into the speech, things start to change. I do believe Rod posted something on our Discord channel that there was a couple links where like you had people using their regular phones, and even someone with their burner phones had Google services turned on, so you can still track people. Is because they logged in through Google, and Google just immediately tags your phone, and it allows you to track you. So that's another way. That's how the law enforcement were able to find people. Now, this is when like the timeline worked, like between the speech where basically Trump is telling the people to walk to the Capitol. You have to. His quote was, "You have to show strength." So people then interpret that as like, okay, we need to stand up for ourselves. We need to show Congress that this was not tolerated. The election needs to be run again or invalidated, and such. And now into a little bit later, before this Trump speech ends, you start to see people going from the Trump's rally speech and start drifting towards the Capitol. And you can, and there's links. There's multiple web pages where people have actually captured from like trackers that basically show people's phones, like the one I showed you, and you'll see them migrating from the actual speech to the Capitol building, at least in the outer ring, the outer perimeter of it, right? And then that's where you start seeing like people are getting physical. They start protesting. Right now at this time, it was mild. It was mild. There's like maybe basically law enforcement there at the time. They could handle it. There was no real danger of it. But then, as more people started getting away from the rally, then they realized that they were starting to get past the actual rails where the police were. So then it starts to condense, and they're coming into the actual like area of the Capitol. And then, as here at this timeline, when Trump was saying, okay, basically, he concludes the speech, he's saying, you know, walk down Pennsylvania Avenue and then towards the Capitol. So he almost directly, but it's at the very least strongly indirectly says, go to the Capitol and basically protest there about what happened and about how the election was rigged. Again, this is from Twitter, this is from Facebook, this is from Instagram, but mainly Twitter, because he was constantly just sending out tweets constantly about this. Now, at that time, Twitter was I believe was like the first platform where they started to like, okay, we can't confirm this, or like this could be like not accurately portrayed. So that's when he put that little link, a little hypertext in his tweets saying like, this is not from a trusted source, or this could be a rumor, don't take it, take it with a grain of salt, basically. But still, he was still allowed to tweet out at that time, how he felt. And then, as you can right here, like the protesters getting more and more in numbers, and they're clashing with the officers. And even then, when they call in for backup, there's actual videos. Again, the videos of them are all over the internet. There's even like S3 buckets in Amazon where like there's like over gigs of video. Where like in this case, like I've seen videos where the protesters themselves had brought bear mace, actual bear mace, and spraying it into the actual officers who were holding the perimeter, and they're trying to get inside. And then here's another platform around 2 p.m. A live stream comes up, a breach of like a massive crowd from the same group of people at the speech that Trump just concluded, going to the east side of the Capitol. And basically, this is the last physical barrier protecting that side of the Capitol. So basically, there's nobody else was guarding. So now we get to like the actual door, essentially, like of the actual entrance, and then people are just trying to get inside. And then roughly about 10 minutes after that, on the northwest side of the Capitol, another stream, again, YouTube, and the militia groups using this platform to encourage people to show, like, hey, we're doing this. You know, we're inside right now. We're getting ready to, storm the gates, basically. And again, so now basically the Capitol is virtually vulnerable on the outside. And then basically right now you have like breaking into the building. Now they have strength in numbers, and basically they had like tools, and then we later find out they actually had, some of them actually did have weapons. But at least for the video footage I've seen, they just either had their bare hands or just like small tools, and they're literally just breaking and entering. This is like a massive breaking and entering, and then burglary at the very least too, if they steal something. But that basically the intent was to get inside and go after the Congress to protest the election was rigged. Now, there was reports in the actual footage too, and it's graphic, I didn't want to share it, but there was an Air Force veteran who was a Quan believer that, about the election being rigged, and wanted to storm basically inside the area where some of the congressmen have not evacuated yet. They were just on lockdown. They couldn't get out in time, so they had to basically shelter in place. And this is kind of like getting into like a school shooting, where to a point, like, okay, if you can't get out, you got to shelter in place. So they took everything, and this is literally as accurate as it sounds. Like, this is like a drill where I had to, when going to the police academy, where you have people basically getting your stuff and taking whatever furniture and stuff around and barricade the door. And you also still have Capitol Police in there too, who were basically just holding the ground. And then this one vet who tried to get through that barrier on the inside basically got shot. And that was the main one we saw about and heard about on the news. So now they're basically inside, and again, from the videos and news clippings, you can see them now. They're the inside. They're on the floor. They're taking pictures. Let me see. Yeah. Let me see here. So like right here. So you can see like how they're just taking pictures. So again, they're using those platforms like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. They're like, hey, we're doing this. We got in. We're showing that we are in charge, and Congress is not. We're here to tell you that the election was rigged, and just getting their beliefs out. Now, what they don't know is how massive the open source intel they just released about themselves, because some were not even wearing masks, and because a lot of these phones, like these high quality phones, like they're like 5-10 megapixels, so high def, and you can clearly run those against like uh, a driver's license database that the FBI can get access to, and or even if they're in the NCIC already, just if someone could be felons, and they could easily determine like, okay, yeah, this person, right? Because you were there. The photo, the video alone is solid evidence where you show the background that's clearly not edited, it's clearly real time, and showing like, yeah, they were there at that time, uninvited, which means they're trespassing at the very least. Now, the one scene where I think probably some of you might have heard about, where this officer Eugene Goodman, he was a U.S. or he still is a U.S. Capitol police officer, where basically we see him. Might see in a photo where he's holding up a tap baton and try to hold people back. Well, there is a video of him where he is confronted with a large group of these people, and they're trying to get into the actual like offices where the congressmen were. So he knew he was outnumbered, flat out. So one of the things that they taught me in law enforcement was to de-escalate, and this was key because he knew that he was not able to like stop him. Period. There's no way, he doesn't have the numbers. So what he did was he was basically like a rabbit. It's like they know they're focused on him, and they know that he's the Capitol Police. So he's trying to keep their focus on him and not on Congress. So you can see him going up the steps and try to like tease them and lure them away, because he knows that he's trying to buy time. I mean, and that's the only thing he can do is buy time. And so that's what he was really good at, because he kept them like somewhat like calm, but then also interested on him. So they kept following him over and over until he can get enough time where the Congress can either be evacuated or at the very least be securely locked down in the rooms. And then sometime after that, that's when they're just completely, nearly completely engulfed the Capitol areas where there's no barricades. And like again, they're on the floor. They're going through papers. That one guy who was in Nancy Pelosi's office, just again, just using those platforms, networking, showing off, like, hey, we did it. We're this is me. They're in the office, and then basically that's when you had the shelter in place going on, where like if you can't get out, shelter, put wherever you can, and just hold off until like it's clear. Which basically on the outside though, the picture of it's like there's this massive swarm that where they were at the rally for Trump is now basically right outside the Capitol, and they were climbing up all over the place, trying to get in, breaking through windows, going through doors. One guy got a hold of a fire extinguisher and threw it at a police officer, I think near his head, like he had his riot gear on. But then basically around the 6:01, 3 hours later, after they've basically started getting into the building, that's when the sergeant at arms, who is basically the overall person in charge of security at the Capitol, declares it secure. Now, there's a catch-22 on that. That basically he meant when secure is like we have all the Congress secured, either they've been relocated or we have enough law enforcement in the building to hold off and even fend off further siege. All right, so now again, it's like they're using this to talk to each other on these platforms. So now you have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram now are like, okay, I'm not allow this anymore. This is not free speech anymore. This is actual physical violence, siege onto like property that they were not invited. They were breaking the law, and then they were using the platform to instigate it and show off. So then you'll start seeing like restricts more than 10,000 Kwan and militia groups. Um, the Twitter starts rolling out the bans. They start now not only start rolling out what they do is they roll out at least like a temporary ban with immediate effect, and then they will go into their policies and they will basically go into and like rewrite them or to a point where they say, okay, in the event of today's activities, we are here to revise the policy about like free speech, organization, and so they now are starting to like roll actual bans. People's accounts getting suspended. And again, it's like also like you see here, more and more accounts, more groups are now were once talking to each other freely, hosting events, rallies, trainings for the groups for whatever. They were no longer having that access now. So now they're cut off from one another. Initially, like right there, it's like, okay, we can't talk to each other, so we get to use phone, text, email, but that's a different set of platforms. But for social networking, they're getting the noose was coming around their neck, basically onto how they were going to be able to not communicate with one another anymore. And basically, like how, like they were saying, like I was saying earlier about the policy don't violations. So again, they were like that. That's it. That's enough. They're not tolerating it anymore. So we come to now where the militia groups need to still talk to one another, and they don't want to necessarily use or because they can't use Facebook or Twitter, but they still need to communicate at least on a social platform level, right? So in a sense, they do a pivot and on a social media network level, and they go to Parler. And so basically, like how like Parler was by an initial analysis, like how there were the microblogging / networking. So it was in a sense kind of like combining both Twitter and Facebook. Like you could do a short text, but also do a short snip or a picture of like what was going on. So basically, like you have like journalists saying it literally is an alternative to Twitter. And so what it is like, okay, so I can't go on Twitter because I got banned. They will try to create accounts, right? Like alternative accounts. But the problem is you need to tell other people that you made an alternate account. But by the time you start reaching out and get enough people to get the message out again, you're already going to get blocked again. So like that's why they went to Parler, because again, it was literally, I guess one person described it as like the Wild West, the digital Wild West, where like you can literally talk about anything, you can say anything, and 9 times out of 10 you will not get even a warning on it. And if you did, it would have been something really bad for Parler overall. But otherwise, you would pretty much have free reign to talk about anything. And then, of course, into like how that says it's a unbiased social network that was both on Google and Apple's App Store. And then when like politicians and other people who had a belief in what happened, they also decided like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be on Twitter or on Facebook, because if they're willing to basically ban them from what they were talking about and then showing off what happened, so then I guess I should just migrate over. So you see here, like all these were actually confirmed people who were on Parler and have an account with them. And you have like Congress, like a congressman right here, and a former ambassador, uh, governors. But yet here they had to like, there was also news clippings and videos where they still had their official account on Twitter or on Facebook, but then they had like an altered, like a secret account on Parler where they could really show their feelings, right? So it's not like politically challenged or like viewed on the mainstream, right? So they could like say how they really felt. And then of course, Trump family, several of their members to join on there also, because after especially what happened with Donald Trump being banned, they realized that okay, well then why why worry about why wait to get banned ourselves? So they went on the account. Now Trump himself didn't necessarily have an account, but what it is, what I found out is his actual campaign created this Parler account. So it wasn't Trump per se, but I'm fairly certain that he authorized this to have an account on there that could be indirectly tied to him. At least he have some influence on it. And then, of course, more people were also signed up for Parler too. And these were like news anchors, basically. Like they were on, maybe not necessarily on the side of the militia groups, but in their views, like what like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram did was basically like, okay, they banned them because what they're talking in this, and then what they view was free speech. So they said, okay, they cut ties with their original platform, or they like drastically cut down on it, and then we're over to Parler where they can actually have like less regulation, you can say, about what they want to say. Um, and so like you had all these other people, commentators, talk hosts, they joined it. But this is where it gets into a gray area, in my opinion. Um, so we have here now. So Parler now starts to get really like high visibility of who's going over there to talk, and they realized that it was basically people who either directly were in the siege or helped organize it, host it, fund it, whatever. So Google, Apple, and start looking into their policies about their apps. And Parler is their app on both their stores. So they realized, okay, they need to enforce or moderate their app. They like you basically it's literally trying to tell, literally Google and Apple are telling Parler, you need to moderate what these people say. So in a sense, you're passing down, in a sense, they're passing out their policies of what is right and wrong onto their platform, onto their app, to say, okay, you need to enforce this, right? So having that said done already, because you get rid of the ball already started rolling with Twitter, because they banned Trump, because it was like a glass ceiling. It's like, who's going to do it first? But then there was more energy behind it afterwards when that started rolling out. So now, like, they're stepping out. It's like, okay, yeah, we're not going to tolerate this. And case in point, Amazon was like, well, they are hosting their infrastructure on our systems, and we know what they're doing, what they're talking about. Maybe we shouldn't host them anymore, right? So like, so in a sense, so like, we don't want. It's like damage control, like in their advice, like, well, we don't want to be involved with them. We're just gonna cut ties with them. And then so you see here, like, how at the time the CEO was saying, like, they're going to be longer down than expected, because you got to realize they had a mass influx of people coming in to host, like, their talks, their ideas, their beliefs, and basically between they were literally trapped in between a digital rock and a digital hard place, and they couldn't really get out because they were cornered by these three tech giants. There was like they couldn't do anything about it. So you see here, it's like he's saying it's not due to software restrictions. It's like their PR, telling the rest of the world, like, no, we don't want to deal with them anymore. They say bad things. They do bad things. They're associated with bad people. We warned them about doing moderation, and, like, you need to establish, like, some guidelines of what's right and what's wrong. So, and then basically right here, it's like if you try to do a lookup at the time, just right after they got cut off, and they're Amazon, it's like you couldn't reach them. And then, like, this is like from Apple's and Google's standpoint about basically, like, in their view of Parler, and they're saying that Parler either directly hosted the actual violence the day of, or at the very least, like, instigated it to, like, or allow even like a vector for allow them to escape from the other social media platforms, so that they can, like, essentially they can get away from the digital law enforcement, I guess, or at least the corporation's version of it, like, where they can, like, don't have to worry about the guidelines being banned, being suspended. That's where they retreated to. But then again, it's like you see here, like, Google and Apple were like, no, we're not going to be doing that. We definitely do not want to be like associated with them. Like, they try to cut so many ties that I think they probably even skipped like a few like legal binding items, like the contract. Say, like in the case of Parler is they're still being able to, like, they should have been able to be hosted by Amazon, but Parler is still suing them on that because they felt like they were basically kicked to the curb because that's what they believe. So it comes down to, like, what this company's belief versus Parler, and so they were like, nope, no more of it. And so, yeah, so that's like, again, he's like, there's nothing we can do. So it's like one of his final messages, like, so, and essentially then for a little bit, they were dark. Like, if you go to their website, they're trying to download the app, it wouldn't allow it because both Apple and Google cut ties that they kicked it off. And there was a I guess like some trolls, I guess, got noticed this and they picked up on it, and they were tricking. At least I read this on Reddit. They were tricking people of Parler, like actual users. They were saying like if you reinstall or uninstall the app and reinstall it, it should work. But then they realized that if they do it, they can't reinstall it because the actual data, the actual app that they took off their phone is no longer there and they can't recover it. So if they try to pull it from the store, the Apple or Google store, it's not there either. So that was going on even too while that part was shut down. So the people were getting trolled about that. Well, okay, so Parler for a time was trying to find people that they can host, at least try to get their infrastructure back up again. And during this time too, people were like trying to distance themselves also because of maybe not necessarily what they thought or what they did in relation to the siege, but it's more so about like if you do business with Parler, then we as in like Google or Apple or Amazon will either have a depreciated relationship or just stop our business entirely and just implement some ethical clause and break the contract and stop services with said provider because they wanted to help Parler. So recently I was able to look up, like doing this in this lookup, and then see how they basically right now they're set up for this server. They're talking somewhere in California now. Temporarily, initially, when they were dropped, they were actually trying to they went out to Russia, and for I do believe probably maybe a month, they were like a temporarily being hosted in Russia by this group right here. But eventually, though, they realized that the long-term goal was trying to get back up again in the U.S. So even though Russia, they made a deal with them, they still ultimately don't want to come back to the U.S. And in which case they did. They made a deal with this company. So they're now trying to get it back up, but from looking at their website, they're really kind of like basically just barely up and running, but it's non-functional. And I do believe they don't even have an app yet supported, still not by Apple or Google. So, and also too, that's funny, interesting too. With Parler, when you went to do a user sign up as a user, they required a driver's license. And I thought, like, okay, for a new user, that seemed like to me like a interesting honeypot if they were to do like something like that. Just gather all that PII, just to sign up, right? And I personally thought like, okay, maybe Parler was in a way like somewhat like in league with the law enforcement. Like, okay, we can see who people are talking about, and like you gather the intel about what they're talking about and what they possibly be doing to launch an investigation on such person or persons, right? But ultimately, though, they are getting back up, but it's basically they're still kind of crippled up because they didn't have that once infrastructure like they had prior to January 6th. So they were significantly downscaled, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were trying to run Parler right now out of like maybe either a large garage or a couple offices, but that's it. they're that hindered down that bad. So after all that's said and done with Parler, as an example, it's now we need to ask each other or ask ourselves, like, what is what is your thought? What is your opinion? Right? Because I can't tell you for everyone of what Parler did was right or wrong. I can only go as far as me, because it literally was using it's saying saying one thing versus doing something in relation to what they said. Because, like, we're saying, like, if I if I say something bad about a person, is it still protected as free speech? And okay, so but if I say the exact same thing on social media, like Twitter or Facebook, is it still going to be this protected the same way, or is it going to be like, okay, maybe not, because they may have stricter guidelines or policies, like, no, you can't say that, period, because they are a private entity that is allowing people to say what they want. But if you put it on their network, then they're saying they have a say of what is allowed on their platform. So, and then also too, is like, can we learn from this, from like not happening? Because Trump recently got acquitted again for the second impeachment, but this is like the first time, like, ever in my knowledge, that the Capitol was actually direct siege, like, and then just not just like the outer perimeter, but the full breach, like inside. They were communicating that well, and even though they were splintered into that way, but still they have that communication platform, and they were using these platforms. But at the same time, it's like, okay, how do we prevent something like this happening again? To say, like, I don't know, like the White House or the Supreme Court, or not even at the federal, like just state levels, like all of, like, these other buildings, like what happened not far back with like Seattle and Portland. Like, they just literally just took over a town or a block of the city, and basically they quote unquote annexed it and made their own rules. It's and again, it's just they're using these social platforms, and then, like, we need to like say, like, okay, where is the line between free speech and corporate policy? Like, where does the free speech where does it cover? Where it say, yes, I can say this, but then also too, like, is it still the same way? Is it the same level of protection if I use a platform that is for quote unquote free speech, that is used all around the world, in other countries that use it to help spread word about democracy or about a coup? That's that's what we each of us have to ask ourselves. So that is my talk right there. If you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Chris. I've been requested to stop recording the questions. So I'm going to stop recording now. Thank you very much. And then we'll continue the conversation.
Okay.